I want to continue our discussion on what exactly the events that have been going on in the previous week meant for you as a viewer and as a citizen of this country. Of course, my very able panelist still here, Mutinda Kavemba. He is a political analyst, Mark Bichache, communications strategist, Dismas Mokua, political risk analyst, and Hesbon Owil. He is, well, a political communications expert. Well, we want to start this segment off with a look at some of the sound bites, well, that the things that have been said about the issues that are at hand and what exactly they mean. This, of course, is expected to give us insights into what the expert positions have been so far. And to start that off, we take a look at what the Attorney General had to say on the issue of the swearing in of Raila Odinga come the 12th of December. Take a look.
A swearing in of any person not lawfully declared to have won an election by the Independent Electro and Boundaries Commission, and a swearing in that is not conducted by the Chief Justice of the Republic of Kenya is a process wholly unanticipated by the Constitution and is null and void and illegal ab initio. I hope I have made that absolutely clear. Further, and in addition, the criminal law of the Republic of Kenya in Article 40 of the Penal Code provides or stipulates that that sort of process is high treason. It is high treason in respect of the person so involved and any other person facilitating that process.
A civilian to be charged for an offense of treason under the law as it exists, even under the colonial penal code, is not an easy offense to prove.
Up until this moment, we have acted within the confines of the law, and the AG will be hard-pressed to demonstrate where, at any one point in time, the National Resistance Movement, NASA, or indeed the People's Assembly has violated the law.
Well, those are the positions there from the various sides to that conversation, and it looks like there is no stopping for these trains. They will indeed collide. But, gentlemen, I put it to you that these are just the symptoms, that this is a storm that has been beating us for quite a while, and what we can see here is just the thunderstorms, the raindrops, the lightning of this situation. And maybe to try and create a bigger picture so that our viewers can begin to try and sort of understand. Let's roll it back to before the elections and indeed look at the prevailing situation the first time round and then the second time round. And I am a voter in Laikipia, so I'll use that example. Now, for a person like me, Peter, to travel home and vote takes 2 hours, about 500 shillings when there's no subsidies involved. And I can be home in 2 or 3 hours, go queue and vote, and be back sitting here with you in just one afternoon. Now, I have colleagues on the business desk from Siaya. Now, for a fellow like Abi Agena to go to Siaya and vote, it's a 12-hour journey one way. It costs him 3,000 shillings to travel there and back at least. And he will have to queue, same as me, and vote. So in essence, well, for me, this is a one afternoon conversation. For a person like that, it's at least 3 days of travel, most likely at night, one way or the other, and expenditures of up to maybe 5,000 shillings, a good estimate. And then you think about the situation that government gazetted just one day as a public holiday for people to go and vote. And in some places, especially in central Kenya and that sort of thing, there were actually subsidies because I could travel home for as little as 40 shillings. He still has to fork out 1,500 shillings. This creates a huge imbalance in the political equation. And when things like that are at play, you start to get the feeling that the system might be structured against you. What do you think?
No. first, even before I go into that,
Yes.
I had spoken about a disruptive agenda.
Yes.
And my co-panelist here disagreed with me, but agreed that
Yes.
there is an agenda for civil disobedience. So I felt that was very contradictory, because civil disobedience, by its very nature, is a disruptive agenda.
Yes.
I am happy that Dismas is in agreement that actually there is a disruptive agenda that is being pursued by NASA, only that he wants to justify it. But we have to put it into context, that we only have a 7-year-old constitution that we passed in 2010. And this is the one that we are almost now trying to disrupt.
Yes.
Yet it is still very young, and it has pointers are that it has been working very well.
Yes.
The best example actually is the annulment of the 8th August election by the Supreme Court.
Yes.
It had never happened,
Yes.
and that took our judiciary to a very different level. I thought we should have pursued that,
Yes.
so that we even continue testing and vigorous testing of our institutions so that they come of age. But somehow after that,
Yes.
the NASA decided that that is...
I'll cut you off because I'm told there might be an issue with your microphone. But sorry to sort of cut you
I'll
short.
pick it up from
Yes,
there.
I want us to react to the situation that I had said, because essentially this is what Kenyans have had to deal with. And this is the thing that has led us to the point at where we are. And we're saying that all these are symptoms. So if we started at the point where you'd start to examine the system that has been put in place for all Kenyans to start to deal with in going to an election, what do you think? What is your take?
I think my take would be, first of all, Peter, you don't have to go back to Laikipia and vote if
Yes.
the bulk of your time is spent here in Nairobi. If Abiy Agina has to take 3 days to go and vote in Siaya, I would rather vote in Nairobi.
Yes.
And I think Kenyans should be encouraged, to look at the electoral process as something that is continuous. It is not a question of you going back to your village, voting and coming back and living in the city, because your vote ought to count. And for it to count, you must be experiencing what the leadership is doing within the area where you're voting. But I think, having said that, to a large extent, yes, you would agree with whatever is happening and have a finger nailed at the electoral system, not just in terms of the voting and the tallying process, but because there is that dearth of knowledge that most of us don't really, as Kenyans, don't really have the capacity as such to rise beyond our ethnic affiliations, our tribal affiliations, and evaluate the political class on real issues, And the electoral process, again, comes to play, because election is not just about the voting, that it is a continuous process that ought to enlighten and inform the citizens that it is not just about going and casting your vote. It's a question of evaluating what is happening, judging the track records of individuals who present themselves again for elections, or looking at individuals who are freshly, getting into the political system. Over time, what have they done? What fresh ideas do they have to offer? And I think as Kenyans, we don't have that space. We have people who, 2 weeks into a nomination, they decide that they want to go into politics, and they get the ticket and they become elected leaders.
Yes.
If you compare this to a country like China, which essentially is the second largest economy in the world, but does not even consider itself a developed economy, it has a single political party, the Communist Party of China, that has 89 million members. And these 89 million members are actually the bedrock of the Chinese economy, the Chinese education system, and you cannot even become an ambassador from China to Kenya if you're not a member of this party. And I think that is the kind of system that we want, a system that is self-regenerating. Political parties that can build membership, that can have a generation of people join into the ideology of the political parties and participate in the activities to build those political parties. Rather than a situation in Kenya where we have individuals who are in political parties and they keep hopping from one political party and, throwing insults at the parties that they are leaving, praising the parties that they are joining,
Yes.
and the circle continues. And, there are very few politicians, for instance, in Kenya, who have very good things to say about political parties that have served them. Someone nominated by political parties, they go to the public domain, they turn back against those political parties. And I think I love the way Kenyans react to some of these politicians, because most of them were thrown out in the last general election.
Yes.
So you get a sense that Kenyans are becoming a lot more conscious.
But the new lot we get is just like the same old one. They
Yes.
don't do much for
And
the
that's
electorate
what
and that
I'm
sort of thing.
saying. that the next thing that we need to look at, and you brought in the issue of education. I am a teacher, you know, and because I'm a teacher at a university, we are all told that if you're not a professor, you're a student. So technically, I am a student. I've not become a professor yet. And you look at our education system and tied to the political system, and you realize that one of the key indicators of a developed economy is levels of literacy. And I think that has become a big problem because a lot of Kenyans are very literate because our education system has produced very brilliant fellas. But then these fellas get out to the job market and they realize that it is not about my qualification. It is not about me meriting a position. It's a question of politics. You know, which political alignment do I belong to? To what extent does my name betray me? And people end up retreating to the tribal cocoons. Why? Because they realize that their education cannot provide them with opportunities. They must come back and start, you know, beating the tribal drums to ensure that one of their own is in power. And I think in the last 5 years, this has been entrenched, and we're in a worse situation than we were during Kibaki's era, because the politics of exclusivity has now been entrenched in our system, so much so that if you're not part of the two tribes, you feel like, you know, you really have to work extremely hard, and it is not just about the qualifications that you have. And I think our political system must find a way of addressing that.
Does that also speak to the quality of electorate we have? Because if you're looking at the same thing that a caveman 30, 40, 50 millennia ago was looking at.
The reason why it does is very simple. That if education is supposed to give us access to information, it's supposed to help us process this information, and it's supposed to help us use this information appropriately, our political class is frustrating this, that we have this education, we have access to information, we can process this information, but then where we want to use this information, now we are sucked up again to a political and tribal cocoons to start talking politics of belonging, which is very unfortunate.
Yes.
Very unfortunate. And I think as Kenyans, we need to be very wary of the way information is being framed by the political class. I mean, you listen to somebody like the Attorney General and you look at the interpretations that he is intending to get from his messages, and it's a mockery of our understanding of the Constitution.
Would then, so to say, skewing of the education agenda in any way then play into this political conversation? Because if you have more schools in some places than others, if the dispersion of education institutions, quality of education in places can be shown to be different or varied, then it does speak into this conversation that we have.
It does, but I don't think it is even a question of that disparity and inequality. It is a question of how our political narrative is being championed.
Yes.
That for as long as we have this politics that does not attend to meritocracy, as long as we are, you know, playing this politics that does not play into, you know, issues of inclusivity, you know, you exclude people, then they will look at education not as a way out of their, you know, social and economic plight, but they look at education as just one way, and then the clincher for them would be they have to be part and parcel of the political class that is in power.
Kavem, I want to let you finish your statement because you are now back online. Yes, and the key thing here is that various aspects of social well, let's say perspectives, livelihoods, being used as pawns in the political conversation.
I like the word is used now, because mostly this is what is happening. This is a fight between the political class, and I like the use of the political class, and this is across the divide. And, and I want to pick two issues so that I demonstrate what I am saying. We are talking about inclusivity. Inclusivity. For instance, let's look at the political formation of NASA, and let's see how inclusive it is within themselves as an organization.
Yes.
The other day, the parliament is in the process of getting names to the East African Legislative Assembly.
Yes.
And I think you saw the names that were given. You know, Dismas had spoken about tribalism, nepotism, and he was trying to imply like it is only one part of the political divide that is guilty of that. That is very dishonest, because we know very well that among the names that were given is a brother to the party leader of NASA and a son to his deputy. Now, how inclusive is that? There have been issues about parliamentary leadership. If today you tell the honorable member for Kajiado Central, Memusi Kanchora, that there is inclusivity in NASA, he will not agree with you. The truth of the matter is that the political class is guilty of these things, and it is across the divide. It is very dishonest for it to be made to look like it is only happening in one side of the political divide. Let's talk about electoral reforms, for instance. Where does the electoral process begin? It begins at the political parties. I am saying this as an active participant in the electoral process, that you first get nomination through your political party. Like, for instance, let's again use an example. The immediate former Secretary General for ODM was Ababu Namwamba. You remember the last time that the party went to do its elections. And it was clear that Ababu Namwamba was going to get elected as the Secretary General. What happened? Men in Black came in and disrupted the whole thing. That is part of electoral fairness. It is the truth of the matter. Come to the nominations. How do they themselves conduct nominations? Because they're in charge of that. As at that point, they cannot blame IEBC or any other party because the parties are fully under their control. Do we see electoral fairness and electoral justice in their parties, or does it only arise when it inconveniences them? Because when it is convenient for them to use electoral injustice to get those they want, and that is actually part of what he is talking about, that issue of inclusivity, or lack of inclusivity, because it is practiced at that point that there are those people you are going, the party leadership is keen on making sure they are the ones who get elected for the different positions. And how do they do this? It is by manipulating the political party nominations, which by itself is electoral injustice. So we are not saying that these things are not there, but it is very dishonest for it to be made to look like it is only one party, one side of the political divide that is guilty of this. So as we discuss these things, we need to be very honest with ourselves and say, okay, this is really not about the key players. This is about our country. How do we ensure that opportunities are availed to everyone? How do we ensure that we practice meritocracy, even in politics? It is by ensuring that there is fairness, that there is transparency, that there is justice, which is
at the risk of sounding a bit foolish. And this is just for us to discuss. When it comes to things like being able to say that you have people you trust, people whose track record maybe you know, and that sort of thing, a sort of a small circle of confidence and that sort of thing, would it then be easier or better to have the sort of people you've known all your life rather than someone who you have met?
Thank you very much. All sovereign power belongs to the people of Kenya. So where do we put that in the context of what you're trying to bring? This is not family business. You know, you can do that in your own private enterprises. You can have the people you trust. But when it is about the electoral process, it is about the will and the sovereign will of the people of Kenya. So you cannot start giving excuses that there are those you trust. What if the people don't trust? This is not about the politicians. It is about the people. And the people can even decide that they actually don't even trust the party leadership itself. So what you're saying, when looked at against the sovereign will of the people, the sovereign will of the people should be let to prevail. And that is why we have systems put in place to ensure that you don't frustrate the sovereign will of the people. But clearly it has been frustrated. And most of these people crying out loud have been as guilty as anybody else. They only come back to start complaining and, grandstanding and all that when it is working against them. But when they are out there doing it against other people, and it has every electoral circle sees a lot of that, and Kenyans know that. It is not something that is hidden. It is something that is very, very open. That actually, most of these people who want to come out and claim about fairness in electoral justice, they themselves are guilty of the same. In terms of inclusivity, they themselves are also very guilty of practicing politics of exclusivity, using what you're saying, that there are people who they trust, and then what is the role of the people? Political parties are not about the leadership, it is about the membership. If the membership feels that it is you who deserves that position better than me, it is not for the political leader to decide that, no, I trust Kavemba more than Peter. That is not how democracy works. And if they are justified to do that, then they should also excuse others who do that when it is within their powers.
And
it is a matter of principle that we let us agree to do things in a certain way, even when it does not serve us. You cannot only complain when something is not serving you, and when it is serving you, your keeping
Quiet.
quiet.
Yes.
So that's what I'm trying to say. That fine,
Yes.
and you know, we normally say that there is the reason and there is the excuse.
Yes.
If you ask me, the issue of electoral justice, the issue of inclusivity, that is the excuse.
Yes.
That is not the reason. The real reason is that these leaders have been used to be part of government. And the electoral results that we got are actually, you know, came out in a way that it's
Yes.
going to keep them out of government. Some of them have been out of government for
Yes.
5 years.
Yes.
Now it's going to be 10 years. And they're determined to ensure, come what may, they have to get back and using the
Yes.
people as pawns. That's why I was very happy about your use of the word pawns.
Yes.
It is really not about the people. If it was about the people, it would be about education,
Yes,
health,
I want to
infrastructure,
bring in
security.
Mark at this juncture and ask, Mark, at one point, 1992, Kenyans rose up with one voice. We stood up and pointed a way forward. It happened again around 1 decade later, the year 2002, where everybody literally was behind President Mwai Kibaki at that point. What will it take for us to be at that point again, even in the face of everything else that we can see being said and done?
There's a saying in the Bible that says, when we mistake good for evil and evil for good.
Yes.
If you're going to change a country, you need an example of that change. The issue here is that we have one party that is saying your brand of nepotism is bad for us, so we want to bring in our brand of
yes.
nepotism. Your brand of corruption is not good for us, so we want to bring in our brand of corruption. Now, the problem there is you cannot choose what is the greater good for Kenya. The second issue that is there is you've got two philosophies of handling the issues of Kenya. There's philosophy number one, which is called sweep things under the rug. We've got roads, we've got houses, we've got free education. Let's not deal with the past.
Yes.
Then there's the other side, which is completely obsessed with the past. Now, the problem with that is you can never come to a consensus unless you agree that in your thinking there is a mistake and in their thinking there is a mistake. And together we can bridge those gaps. And this is where the problem lies. The problem lies in a NASA establishment which believes it's absolutely right, forgetting that in 2007, when we did the report from Judge Kriegler, we found that both PNU and ODM at the time had participated in electoral fraud.
Yes.
Let's be honest. So let's not imagine that suddenly ODM, rebranded NASA today, is the angel and Jubilee is the devil. It cannot be true. And when we understand that we as a country are participating in what we call moral fraud, where we are trying to pretend that this lady we've brought before Jesus is guilty of adultery and we are the innocent ones.
Yes.
Well, the reality is that both of these entities have issues that they need to sort.
Yes.
So how do we solve these issues? As a country, we need to stop. We need to stop escalating the tensions that we are escalating unnecessarily, because the Constitution is not broken. And this is what I mean.
Yes.
Number one, the Constitution involves within itself the ability to devolve power, meaning inclusivity, and also has set rules by which the president must appoint cabinet
Yes.
and the civil service. If we were to stick to the same document that we've all agreed to, Kenya's problem would be reduced. But the problem is we are dealing between facts and the imaginations of the abused. What do I mean? That it is in the imagination of a lot of people that if Moi came from Baringo, then Baringo should be the richest county today. And yet Baringo is one of the poorest. We imagine that since Uhuru Kenyatta comes from Gatundu, every project starts in Gatundu, which is not true. Now, the reality of the matter is does Kenya need improvement? Yes, it does. Is it improving? Yes, it is. By any measure of societal indicators,
Yes.
we are improving. Therefore, we need to appreciate the fact that we are improving, and then we also need to appreciate that there's the need to agitate for better. Now, the only time you step out of the Constitution to agitate for better
Yes.
is if constitutional mechanisms are not working.
Yes.
But the truth of the matter is this, that governorships are working, the county assemblies are working, the national parliament is working, the Senate is working, there is space within those institutions for a structured opposition. The opposition has not been stopped to operate in parliament
Yes.
or otherwise. Allow
Yes.
me to finish.
Yes.
And therefore, for me, it is wrong for us as a country to step out of the constitution to try and fix something that's not broken by creating a crisis that does not exist. Are there problems? Yes. Are they at crisis level? No. And that is why we cannot stand here and pretend to say that the actions of Raila Odinga are not an attempt at anarchy. They are. Are there issues? Yes. But has it gotten to the point where we need to get there? No.
Well, Dismas, give a dog a band name and then kill it. Are we trying to demonize the aspirations of the people? Are we painting these things with a brush that will enable us sweep matters under the carpet? Or is it true that there is no crisis? We don't need to be at the place where we are today?
Well, I indicated earlier on that there's a crisis in Kenya. And if you do not see the crisis in Kenya, then you need to go back to the Bible, and then we say in Swahili, when you're mgeni Jerusalem, that you can have President Kenyatta getting re-elected back to office by 98% of the votes. That's a crisis. Because a good part of the nation said we are going to boycott the election. That we are going to have Jamhuri Day, and a section of Kenya will be going to Kasarani, and another section is waiting to be given instructions on where to go. That is a crisis.
Yes.
And it's such a huge crisis that in my professional life, when I meet with international investors and analysts who are coming to Kenya, want to invest in Kenya, they'll ask you two questions. Number one, how is President Kenyatta going to form his cabinet? Is it going to have the face of Kenya?
Yes.
Is he going to create his the principal secretaries? Are they going to have the face of Kenya? Are they going to be given positions based on meritocracy? That's one question most people are asking. Then the second question is, why is Raila Odinga? What is he thinking of? When he goes mute for a few days, people will ask, what is he thinking of the nation? When he speaks, people will attempt to interpret that. And that comes to the point made very eloquently by Mark here, that we have issues as a nation. And he says you have two options. You sweep them under the carpet, you accept and move on, or you revisit the issues, establish why they happened, you come with a keyword, then you move on. Maybe that's an issue which is supposed to be subjected to philosophical thinking to find out how we're supposed to make progress. But in a country that has made very good progress, like South Africa, they got Desmond Tutu to chair a committee on truth, reconciliation, justice, peace, all those are rolled into one, to find out where did the rain start beating us, and how do we make progress. Now, if you don't do that, then you are going nowhere. As we keep on saying, when you're suffering from malaria, you have to get the medication for malaria. You don't go look for Panadol. You can get all the Panadol made in the world, you swallow them, but you are never ever going to recover. So we must address those fundamental issues. And Kavemba has spoken about them. When you talk about tribalism, nepotism, and friends, all the political formations in Kenya are guilty. There is a Jubilee guilty of that. There is a NASA guilty of that. Yes. But there is a larger burden in the political party that is running the nation. That is Jubilee. He's given examples of the people who are nominated by NASA to the East African Legislative Assembly. But conveniently, he did not discuss the nominations of Jubilee. That's number one. And then number two, he did not discuss the people who are nominated to the National Assembly and the Senate by Jubilee to see whether there's a dotted relationship to the party leadership. So when he talks about intellectual dishonest, then we need to have it to have it across the board.
Yes.
But believe me, Wakaba, the issue we're having in Kenya, which is a crisis and which you cannot ignore, because it's getting to boiling level.
Yes.
It's like when you've got malaria, or you go to an hospital and for some reason you've got a terminal illness.
Yes.
You must accept that you've got a terminal illness and at some stage you're going to die. That if you're a rich man, you've got many spouses, you start looking at your will.
Yes.
And that's what you must be looking at today. Because our issue right now, we've got a very solid constitution, and a constitution is a living document. You can pass the constitution today, and you're made this the following day if there are some things you need to sort out. In any event, the deputy president says 20% of the constitution is not solid. But the biggest issue in Kenya that is going to compromise our nation as a going concern is counting the votes, and it's a basic issue of just counting the votes. That is what is going to compromise our national security and our national prosperity.
I want you to stop you right there, because that's the point at which I want us to come back into the discussion after the break. But I want us to go to the break from this perspective that one of the measures the UN uses to measure quality of life for most people is a thing they call the gross National Happiness Index. And the fact of the matter is, if we were to assume that the population of Kenya is 44 million Kenyans, then about 23 million Kenyans are really unhappy at this point, I have heard it said, while maybe another 23 or 22 million might be very happy. We don't know. But the thing is, this thing is split almost right down the middle. So what then is the way forward? Think about it. On that note, we want to proceed on that short break. But when we do come back, we, of course, again, go back to the genesis of the matter, talk about it from a different perspective, and this time bring in the aspect of social indicators and what exactly